If at all you get behind, just shoot her an email. She's really flexible, tries to work with you and your schedule. If you're having any issues or any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Course content is really for Sandra, but if you email one or both of us, we'll make sure that it gets to the right person. Make sure you turn in those assignments by Sunday night. And lastly, if at all possible, try to keep your camera on. We know you're listening, but it's just because we can't be in person, you know, having the video on is always nice to be able to see your face, so that whoever's speaking can see your face and see your reactions. Otherwise, we won't know when our jokes are funny. But see, it still doesn't matter because my jokes are never funny. Anyways, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Wimer here for us. Thank you for joining us. I won't steal your thunder, but Elizabeth is a professor at Syracuse University at the Whitman School of Management. She teaches a couple classes, and her forte is marketing. She's also a very, very good teacher. She speaks at multiple programs for us, including our Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for Veterans, our VWise program, and she's done a couple of other things for IVMF as well. She is amazing, and I'm very happy that she is with us this month. So I will throw it to you, Elizabeth. If you could just introduce yourself, just give us a little bit of your background. They do have a link to your bio, and then we'll get started.
All right, thank you. I think the most important thing that you should know about me, beside the fact that I am incredibly caffeinated, that's usually the lead-in that Deanna gives you. I talk faster than most instructors because I am caffeinated throughout the day and continue to caffeinate into the evening. In fact, while she was talking, I was scanning your bios to see if anybody was going into coffee, because that was going to be my favorite student, but apparently you guys have not gotten the memo yet, and you're going into things like services and bettering mankind. But you know, coffee can also better mankind. I just like to remind you. And then the other important thing to know is that as I was crossing my living room to log on tonight, I was like, I don't actually know what I signed up for. I could be teaching, I could be on a panel, I could be. So anytime Deanna asks me to do something, I default to yes, and then usually follow up with, but what exactly do you want me to do? But tonight, I now understand that I am talking in a Q&A about marketing. It's going to be awesome. I could teach if you want me to. I could talk about coffee if you want me to. But more importantly, I want to answer your questions. And so what I find most helpful is to answer questions from the group. If it's specific to your business or your idea, usually I can pull it up to a bigger concept that we can all learn about. Or sometimes people just want to know what the foundational concepts are, and I can help there too. I do have a couple foundational pieces that I usually start with. Deanna, would I have met anybody here from VWise, or is that not the same crossover crowd? Oh, whoa.
So there are a couple.
Anita and I are hugging right now, and then everybody else can get in here. Hey, Anita, what's up? Have I met you? Get in here.
I think yes, you did. You met me in Buffalo.
Buffalo. All right. Nice to see you again. So can you verify for everybody else that I actually do know what I'm talking about once I get on topic?
Oh, she does. I took copious notes. Yes, she does.
All right. Awesome. Have I met anybody else, or is it just me and Anita having a love fest over here?
I can't think off the top of my head. I think Jessica did VWise down below. Tiffany, have you ever done VWise? No. So there's just a couple. So
okay.
I think,
and that's fine too. I just like to always give a shout out to people I might know. Tiffany lives in the town that I moved from. You're in Frederick, Tiffany, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I regret my choice every day. I moved to Syracuse in 2002. My husband promised me a 5-year stop, and here we are, and it's 2020. So I miss Frederick deeply and desperately. So please do Frederick well while I'm not there. All right. So other than that, do you want me to go into my spiel, Deanna? Do you want me to talk more about coffee? Where would you like me to?
So I think it usually works best if you share just, a couple of foundational pieces, and then that kind of helps the group spur on some conversation and some questions from there.
All right, great. So the first key piece is that I found my co-presenter. James has given me a shout out at coffee, which means that he'll be answering all of my questions from here on out. So pressure is off everyone else to get cold called on randomly. It will be indeed James picking up the slack for us. So well done, James. Everyone else, what I like to start with when we talk about marketing is not necessarily the 4 Ps. You have gone over the foundations, and not even the foundations of conventional marketing, but of entrepreneurial marketing and an entrepreneurial approach to it. What I like to start with is to remind everyone, do not give it away for free. Fill in the blank, your product, your service, your time, your effort. Don't give it away for free. And I find that as we go deeper into this coronavirus odd-shaped world that we're in, more and more entrepreneurs are feeling like maybe they need to reach in and give something away for free. They need to either entice people with a product sample or discount what they had as a package or a bundle in a way that entices people to come and take advantage of their product or service. And I think what is most often overlooked when entrepreneurs think about giving something away for free is the fact that once you either significantly discount or give your product or service away for free, you have taught your customers that any price in the future above free or above that discount is no longer the same value. So think about how you're going to entice customers as part of a strategy instead of that knee-jerk reaction to give something away so that you can maybe get their business in the future. Instead, what you're doing, as I've just said, is usually teaching your customer and everyone else who happens to know about this offer that your product or service is not worth what it is that you usually charge for it. So that's where I like to start, especially in this time of kind of reactionary marketing. Sometimes when we get this deep into a weird shift in the world, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a recession, I find that entrepreneurs start to discount not just their product price, but also their time and their effort and their investment that they've made to get their idea or their business as far along as it is. So make sure that you're assigning the value of you to that product and price, and you're not giving it away for free. So that's the first big idea that I want to start with. And then the second big idea is to challenge you to think of any problem you might have or any question you might have about marketing in this way. I want you to think about, how do I move my stakeholders? How do I move my stakeholders? Now, stakeholders could be customers, they could be suppliers, they could be vendors. But instead of saying, how do I sell more to my customers? Or how do I get a better price from my supplier? Instead of using that terminology, by just changing out some words, reframing to say, how do I move my stakeholder? You do 2 important things. The first thing is you think about moving as an action that you accomplish together. And marketing is about moving together, moving hopefully so that you, the entrepreneur, and whoever's next to you, let's just say it's your customer, move together toward value that you can provide and that they find very worthwhile. That move is a central shift away from sales and selling, but accomplishes the same goal of getting to a beneficial place for both of you. Now, one book that fits really nicely with this, and I think I recommend it every time, even though I'm not yet sponsored by Dan Pink, I should be, because his book, To Sell is Human, is the foundational text of this idea of moving people. If I could talk and type at the same time, I would put it in the chat pane. If I take a breath later, perhaps I will have a chance to. But the book is To Sell is Human by Dan Pink. And it helps you, it's quick, it's a simple read that helps you shift your perspective from selling to moving, and to think of not just customers, suppliers, and vendors, but as your stakeholders, as one group that you can provide value to, that you can work with. Thank you for putting that in the chat pane, Deanna. So it's the other big idea I like to start with too, because I think most marketing questions come from either a misconception or an error in judging one of those 2 areas. Should I give this away for free, or how do I sell to someone? When we instead think, I'm not going to give this away for free, I'm instead going to develop a strategy. And when you say, how can I move my stakeholder? A lot of what you might be finding to be sticky in marketing starts to work itself out. So I told you I'm highly caffeinated. Like that was all just one breath, and I can go on and on, but it's actually more fun if we talk together, if we move together. So I'll take a breath now and see, does anybody have a question related to marketing, their business, their idea that maybe we could start playing around with?
So Jessica Calhoun posted a question in the chat. When you're talking about discounts, she's just wondering what your opinion is on giving discounts for veterans, first responders, et cetera. And how would you go about that?
All right, that's a great question. So there's a few layers into that just one question. Oh my goodness, Jason, you've now been elevated to TA. He put the link to Amazon in there. Excellent. I'm sorry, whoever was the coffee, James, you've been dethroned. Jason is now the new lead student. Excellent. All right, so the question I was answering though is, how do we handle veterans? Because as veterans or as civilians that want to partner with veterans, we need to make this designation. Now, it's not always I give you free, I give you discount, but sometimes I give you extra. Sometimes you purchase my product or service and you get a little bit more as a thank you. And that could be a thank you to a veteran. That could be a thank you to a first responder, but it's not free. Because you also need to be compensated for your time and effort and all of the energy you've put in to your idea or product or service. So you don't want to discount yourself, but you want to say thank you. So by, again, reframing, instead of saying, how can I give a discount? Instead, it's saying, how can I say thank you? How can I acknowledge the work that this person or these group of people are doing by saying, I give you a little extra? That's a different way to look at it. Who was that? Jessica, did that answer your question? All right, perfect. Somebody was trying to give me a high five here. Who was raising their hand? They had a dog. Alan, was it you? Do you have a dog, Alan? Is it a cute dog?
No, they're absolutely fantastically gorgeous.
Oh, fantastically gorgeous, but I bet that was not your question. So did you take your question, and I'll also take a screenshot of your dog. Go ahead.
You kind of went into it anyway. So instead of the discounts, and I've read enough to say don't give anything away for free. So I'm glad to hear that out loud. But you're talking sort of a +1 strategy. Mm-hmm. So this is what you get. This is how much it costs. But here's an extra sample of coffee in your purchase, or here's a sticker for your car, as opposed to a discount.
A little something extra, absolutely. Now, another way that we could look at this, because some people say, perhaps I don't have a product that I can give away as a +1. Well, think about how you might be able to front load that thank you. So let's say that I ran a marketing consulting business. And if someone that I wanted to say thank you to approached me and wanted my services, perhaps I would start by saying, you know, in exchange for your contact information, your email, and a few quick answers that help me identify my customer base, I provide you with a one-page PDF of some of my tried and true marketing practices that I've learned work for entrepreneurs. That would be kind of a front-loaded or a gateway thank you. And then after that, if that person chooses to engage my full services, they would get the full price that comes along with it. So we talk kind of about how to do a +1, but if you're in a service space, sometimes that gateway, sometimes that little something that is not necessarily free because you're collecting data and you're finding out more about your customer base. Sometimes that up front is a different way to work the same strategy.
Thank you very much for answering that, Elizabeth. We have another question in the chat that was sent to me privately. James actually has a question. He cannot verbally respond, so he'll respond in the chat. He's really talking about, it's more of a market research question, I think. How does one begin to find where your market hangs out? He provides digital therapeutics for mental health. I'll just read some more. He says, I'd like to target mental health service valuers. He just doesn't know where they reside.
Okay, all right. So sometimes the market market that you're looking for doesn't all hang out together in a coffee shop all day. This is probably not news to all of you. It doesn't mean that you can just bump into 10 people that immediately want your service, especially as you get more specialized. What I would recommend in this sort of situation, especially with something specific like mental health, is to influence the influencer. Very often there is someone that cares for, works with, or in some way is associated to the person who could most benefit from your services. And that person could be the gateway in to you providing whatever therapeutic mental health services you could provide. Sometimes the influencer is actually your customer, and then the person you thought was your customer is the user. That distinction between customer and user sometimes helps people reframe who it is that they're really trying to reach, who it is that they're trying to move. And so instead of trying to help my customer from that mental health point of view, you would reframe it by saying, how can I move that influencer so that we together can assist my customer? I see James has said, and great points. He's either had a great cup of coffee and then agreed with, oh, yes. All right, excellent. Then he got to, I can take this one, Deanna, don't worry. He says, what kind of coffee do I drink? This is the magic elixir. I drink exclusively Papua New Guinea beans. They have to be single origin. And if you rolled your eyes, it's fine. I get that all the time. But I do indeed get very specific with the type of coffee that I drink, because I have now become addicted to this level of energy. And I find Papua New Guinea that gets me there, and it's delicious. So James, excellent questions, and I appreciate the coffee love.
Elizabeth, I actually have a question. I actually remember it from past presentations that you've done, because some of our classes is still in that kind of ideation formulation stage. And there's a couple that are actually even just working through, what business should I start? And what's the best idea, and testing their business idea. So could you explain a little bit about the man who created coffee, because of the music, like that it sounded like jazz? I just remember that, and I just remember that was so cool, and how that could relate to the overall group as they're working through their business idea.
I've just put my cup aside, like it's going to get serious. It's about to get real. Okay. So a few things that I need to put in the chat pane so that I can support my discussion. First of all, Anita has proved that she and I did know each other well when we met in Buffalo. It's a Jura Capresso machine, Anita, and you're right. That was the perfect example for yes, we get each other. Yes. All right, that's not what we're about to say. It's Jura Capresso. But anyway, I want to give you 3 different types of needs. So the first need that we're going to very briefly talk about is issue-oriented need. And then we're going to talk about opportunity-oriented need. And then we're going to talk about emotional-oriented need. These 3 types of need can help you kind of get your head around what idea you might be working with, and will lead you into not just a marketing strategy, but a full development strategy to start to nurture your idea from what I think might work to, oh, here's the need that I can fill. So let me try to do this in a succinct way, because I could get off in like 45 minutes on this tangent, but let me try to do it succinctly. When we think of 3 kinds of need, the first kind of need that most of us would love to solve is an issue-oriented need. That's a really specific need. So when we think about products like the rodent sheriff, we think about a specific need. If I have mice in my household, I have a need for a product. That's a one-to-one issue. Now, entrepreneurs can be successful solving those kinds of needs, but first of all, it's never very interesting. And second of all, it's usually very easy to duplicate. If it's an issue-oriented need that's obvious, either someone's working on it, they've done it, or they've done something that might help that. An issue-oriented need can be profitable as long as you collect enough data to really define the need well. My example here is usually Starbucks. So they introduced their blonde roast, not because they needed another type of coffee, but because they collected data from their customers that said that coffee's too bitter. I come in there and I have to add sugar. It's too strong. And when they got that feedback, instead of saying, well, let's add more syrups, They said, we have an issue and we're going to make a lighter roast. We're going to make a blonde roast. It was a more complex issue-oriented need. And it's fine if you solve those needs, just make sure you do it in a really value-centered way so that it's not easily duplicated. All right, that's the first type of need. The second type of need is opportunity-oriented need. And that's the need where you have to tell your customers what it is they're missing out on in life. Think about soda streams when they first launched. We were not all collectively sitting around in our houses like, if I could just make myself some fizzy water now, life would be perfect. We didn't collectively think that. There wasn't a public outcry for soda streams, but it was a really successful product because when they launched, they taught the customer what they were missing out on. They played up the health incentive of it. They played up the customization of it. Soda streams were an opportunity-oriented need because you taught your customer what they needed and then you answered it with your product. Now, the third time, the type of need that Deanna was talking about is the emotional or the opinion-oriented need. And that's the kind of need that comes from an entrepreneur. And it's a place of needing to create something very specific, even if profit doesn't follow. So the example that she was talking about is actually James Freeman, who is the founder of Blue Bottle Coffee. He was a jazz musician and he wanted to create a cup of coffee that made people feel the way he felt when he played jazz music. Now, I love Jason's eyebrows because that's everybody's eyebrows when they hear that. They're like, wait, what? This guy's making me make coffee that tastes like. His idea was that he had such a strong emotional reaction to his excitement for jazz music. He wanted to recreate that feeling for coffee drinkers. Now, he didn't set out to make $1 million brand. He set out to answer that need without regard for if it was profitable. Sometimes emotional or opinion-oriented needs are so strong that it resonates with other people and leads to profit. In James Freeman's case, his company scaled up and was acquired by Nestle. Like, he's fine. He's doing quite well for himself and his feelings of jazz music right now. But it wasn't his end goal. It was to answer this emotion, this opinion-oriented need. So that might help you kind of categorize what it is that you're ideating and thinking about, whether you have an issue or an opportunity, or whether it's an emotional or opinion-oriented need that you're trying to manifest or address.
Thank you very much. Blue Bottle Coffee. Now I will always remember and I will never forget it. I even have some of the presentation saved. I don't know why I couldn't remember it, but that really resonated with me, to drink coffee like that and make you think of jazz, like how you feel with jazz music. It's a passion for sure. Jason has a raised hand, but we have one question ahead of you, Jason. So we'll go to you after. Alan put another question in the chat, is wondering, are there effects for scalability and duplicity in terms of marketing, or are these completely separate concepts?
Ooh, Alan's asked a semester-long question that I'm going to answer in 3 minutes or less. All right, so he said,
I have all night.
Hallmark Christmas is on, Alan. I do not have all night. There's a new movie starting this evening that I need to attend to. All right, so he says scalability and duplicity. Yes and yes, but carefully and with intention. So I would back this all the way up and say, before any marketing is implemented, you have to have a sound strategy, and a strategy that you revisit every 6 months to make sure that your implementation is still lining up not just with your strategy, but also with its intended effects. So let's just try to take one of his ideas. He says, what about scalability? Now, from my understanding of your question, and we could maybe add on to this in a minute, but from an entrepreneur's point of view, your superpower is the fact that you can test in real time what does and doesn't work with your audience. If you think about a traditional corporation, they have to go through research and development, marketing focus groups. They invest so much money before they even implement the marketing campaign that they are going to try it a good long time before they decide if it's good or bad. As entrepreneurs, you can try a few things. You can maybe hit social in a new and interesting way, and also try some public relations, and also try a small sales campaign all at the same time and see what works. And then when you see what works, you can pivot and scale up because you have this agility of being able to try a few things instead of what traditional corporations have as this like weighing down of only being committed to one tactic. Need a drink.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much. Jason, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Elizabeth, I guess I'll build on the strategy. So in all the Boots to Business videos that we watched and everything else, they talked about social media not being a strategy. However, have you seen that transition in the last 10 years? I mean, right now you look at YouTube and you got people that had no marketing strategy. They're all on YouTube and they're making a profit being on YouTube without doing anything else.
The wonders of TikTok. First of all, that's a sidebar that like still blows my mind. I don't understand. They're not even really dancing. These are like fake dancing dancers. But what you're asking is social a strategy? Social itself is not a strategy, but it can support a flawless marketing strategy. Social is an implementation tool. One thing I want to leave you with, it might be a new way to look at social, is instead of saying, how can I attack social media? Think about who are my micro influencers. I'm not looking for the big companies to retweet me or like me. I'm not looking to reach all of my customers with this one Instagram feed. Instead, I want to find maybe 3 micro influencers. And micro influencers, by definition, are Instagram or social media figures that have 2,500 or less is about the sweet spot. Now, not down to 25, but about 2,500, maybe down to 1,000. You want to find the people that already have the attention of your audience in little pockets. So who is that person that's talking about mental health because their family is walking through that right now? And how can I come by and assist them or talk to them or in some way make an impact so that what their life shifts because of my service is then reflected to their followers? So that's like one specific example because the mental health thing was stuck in my mind from before, but micro influencers is one aspect of social media that I find is very successful for entrepreneurs because there's an approachability to it and it also can support an overarching strategy.
Thank you. Since we're talking about strategy, I'm going to skip a couple, but don't worry, we'll come back to them. Spencer is asking about, what is your opinion on marketing strategies that are best suited for service companies? He's an HVAC company. Home Advisor is effective, but really expensive for leads. How would you suggest marketing to an obvious need for a starting company like his?
Okay. So what I didn't know about Home Advisor, and I found this out when we needed a service that we don't usually get. And apparently, and you know this, Spencer, but like you have to pay every time somebody calls you, right? So you are, even if they never follow up, even if they don't want your services, you pay just for the privilege of having them call you or you call them back, right? When someone told me that, it was something so specific. It must have been like our front steps or something. I was just flabbergasted because the consumer does not know that. Now, if the consumer knew that you were paying just to have that contact, I would probably be a little bit more strategic in how many people I was trying to like list on my Home Advisor page. So let's think about that transparency for a minute. And think about the types of services that people very often don't stray from once they find a person that they can count on. Like my HVAC guy's name is Pete. We've been in this house 14 years and Pete comes in, he's like, hey, you got new carpet. Like he knows it all because Pete will be there for me. And here's how Pete got there for me. Pete, first of all, came around that time of year, and this is so specific for HVAC, we'll blow this up in a minute. He came around that time of year when I wasn't thinking about my air conditioning. It was like March, and I was right in between the heat, the air conditioning thing. And Pete put little flyers all around our neighborhood saying, air conditioning season's coming. Here's my magnet you can put on your fridge. And I also do tune-ups. Well, that kind of like got it in the back of my head and I put the magnet on the fridge and he's the first guy I called when we had a problem. And then Pete, when he showed up, didn't give me a business card. He gave me a piece of paper from his wallet and he was like, here's my cell phone. If your air conditioning goes out in the middle of the night, you call me and I'm going to come because this is my company and I'm not part of a big company. I'm part of serving you. Okay, so that's step one. And that's like a really micro example to blow it up to my bigger point. I can tell people Pete's name and his life story, and you know for sure I do. So Pete's biggest marketing tool is me because he treated me really well. And now all my friends that I come in contact with, the minute they mention air conditioning or a new house or a big service that they need, I'm like, oh, you got to call Pete and let me give you his cell phone number. So I think for service industries, specifically something where people stay with you forever, like accountants, you stay with your accountant forever and ever and ever. The more you can build that relationship one-on-one, and it feels tedious, but it is so important. That person will work harder for you than any home advisor ad ever will. I could also give you Pete's number if you want to follow up.
I do my own HVAC. I like the answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So Lola had a question about when we were talking about the needs. Can you try to manifest on all three of the needs with your customers?
It wouldn't be all three. It's a possibility that you are emotionally invested in an opportunity-oriented need. So you're manifesting something, and when you get that idea, you're like, this actually is brand new. I have to educate my customer about this. So if we go back to James Freeman, he is widely credited with making the pour-over coffee popular. Pour-over coffee, most of us might be familiar with at this point, but when he started the pour-over, Anita, yeah, you got me on the pour-over too. When he started making his coffee, not only was the single origin important, but the way he produced it was too. So he did have a dual need. He had this emotional need of jazz music through coffee, but then he also had a system that was an opportunity oriented. So sometimes those two go together, but there's really not a natural fit for any of the others.
Thank you. We had another question on how do you play up an emotional reaction for a product like wood gifts? It is an optional buy.
Can you define wood gifts for me? I'm excited about this now. What's a wood gift? Is it like a cutting board that's handmade?
They're in the chat. I don't think that they have audio available. So why don't we wait and see if that answer, why don't you post what exactly you mean about wood gifts?
Okay.
And then we'll come back to that. That question's just piling in. So this is awesome. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, wood gifts like cutting boards or gifts for military people that's leaving, or Boy Scout plaques or stuff like that.
Okay, and you're saying how is it that you make this valuable, customizable?
Right, now how do you make the connection with the customer to make it more emotional for them?
Okay.
Sweet.
I want to tell you about,
you know what I'm saying?
Here. Can you read that? So
handcrafted
by Randy Lord. So this guy worked with my dad. This cutting board is like older than my oldest child. This is a solid 15 years old. He worked with my dad and he did this as a hobby on the side, right? And my dad just got one, but was branded with this. Now, when I used this, I loved it. So I looked up my man, Randy Lord, and I followed him because of this brand. Sometimes it's a literal brand. And it's beautiful the way that he has it in here too. There's a little mustache over by Randy Lord. Every time I see this, I say a little prayer over Randy Lord. Like, this made me feel like I know the guy and I've never met him. But it's just a cutting board. And it's something I've held on to. And it's the first thing I thought of when you said wood gifts. So I would say, in addition to those connections that you're going to make, maybe through micro influencing, maybe through that one-on-one connection, have something that lives beyond your initial relationship, so that when the cutting board finds the way to the daughter, she has a way to find you. Do you make cutting boards, by the way? Because this is 15 years old and it's getting a little.
I love it. I love it. So we're still kind of talking about, you mentioned kind of relationship versus, to the customer, things like that. Alan has a question on if you could speak to more into, how to create the relationships with the end user versus the customer. Oh,
Okay.
Good question, Alan.
So you need to know why they're there. Let me use my education kind of space as an example, and then maybe we can get more specific to the business that you're into. So this semester, think about how different the end user and the customer are for an undergraduate education. My first year students are my end users. My customers in most cases are their parents. Okay, now their parents have sent off these 18-year-old students into a world of they don't know what, to a college they don't know if they can trust or not, and they've left their most prized possession. Now, as the professor of the first year students, I have to pay attention to the customer. Or the end user. I want to pay attention to the end user, but I never forget about the customer themselves. So one thing that I did this semester is set up office hours for my top 10% students and ask them to bring their parents. And when their parents showed up, I said, I just want to tell you, your kid's doing great. And what you may not hear on the weekend or what you may not see reflected in their grade is that they're showing up and they're participating to class. And these students are showing me that even in the hardest of times, they're there to learn. And I'm proud to be their professor. Okay, 9 out of 10 moms cry at that, but 10 out of 10 of those customers, the ones that are funding the education, realize someone on the other side cares. And that translates no matter to what you're selling. It could be this wooden cutting board, but I promise you, like, Randy cares about this cutting board. He put time and effort into this thing. The weight of this shows me that Randy cares deeply. But the fact that that connection is something that you're trying to manage, that's the place you start. First, you figure out who those are, because very often they're two separate people. But second, you have to take care of them in really different ways.
Awesome. Thank you. Alan, I love his commentary. You just have a cutting board sitting next to your computer for specifically this kind of discussion?
I have a 14-year-old that I was like, cutting board,
go
now.
get it.
You need 14-year-old.
So kind of just to continue to elaborate on the relationship development, Jessica had a question on how do you keep track of these personal relationships that you develop? Do you use your CRM to make notes about a client? What would your suggestions be there?
So you're going to make notes about the client that are only important to you and the client. So what I mean by that is figure out whatever works for you. Some people it's still pen and paper. Some people it's an Excel spreadsheet. Some people it's a whole fancy system that they invest in. It doesn't matter the system. It matters what you're doing with it. And so, for instance, with my students, I find out really specific things about them. I find out what their favorite order at Dunkin' is, and I find out who their favorite football team is, and I find out all of the details I need so that when I need to reach out to them about something that might not be very pleasant to talk about, I can start by saying, hey, the Jets actually won a game. How'd you feel about that? That's never going to happen. But we could talk a little bit about the Jets. We could talk about something they're passionate about and then pivot to that conversation about why maybe they didn't come to class. Now, again, that's specific for education. In the customer and marketing space, it's important that you have something to talk to your client about that's not you always trying to talk about your product. And so that could be anything. For me, most of the time it's coffee. So I'm going to answer your email if anything in the subject line indicates coffee in it. And maybe you've asked me 20 questions about marketing, but you hooked me with the coffee because you remember that I'm absolutely in love with coffee. So your customer relations management focuses on what's important to your customer, of course, but not the obvious things that anybody could know. One of my favorite key takeaways for this is to be interested, not interesting. People know you're interesting, but really they want to prove to you that they're interesting. So if you show up interested and forget about being interesting, you're going to go well farther into your relationship than you would otherwise.
Well, that's a great note to remember. I just wrote that down. That's perfect. I think that can help in everyday life.
Yes.
in just developing relationships with people. James had another question. Was wondering if you might just be able to speak to business strategy a little bit. He said, in particular, like, what is it in the context of business? James, do you understand what I'm saying, Elizabeth? I'm not sure if I fully understand the whole question. James, if you want to elaborate a little bit. Are you talking about business strategy in terms of marketing? Define business strategy.
Defined business strategy. Ooh, I like how you guys throw me a couple softballs and then you show up and you're like, just give me all the answers. All right. Okay. So when we think about business strategy, the way I think is most succinct to present this is an umbrella. So your business strategy is the big umbrella. Now, each spoke of the umbrella, think of a golf umbrella that kind of has those points at the end. Each point has a different connection to the overarching strategy. And you need each point, otherwise the umbrella collapses in that one little place, or it doesn't fully open and it's kind of sideways and it doesn't do the protective job it's made to do. So if I was going to open a coffee shop, my overall business strategy would be my mission and my vision. What am I doing? Why am I entering this space? Where do I want to be in 5 years here? Then the one spoke would be my marketing. That would be my communication, my finding my target market, taking care of them really well, and making sure that they can see my mission and my vision. Another spoke here would be my finances. And I would hate that spoke, so I'd probably have my husband do it. But some of you might like numbers and enjoy the finances. And in the finances, we would talk a little bit about how I'm going to get money and how I'm going to move that money into the places it needs to go. Sometimes that's my supplier, sometimes that's my business, my operating expenses, my variable costs. That's my one spoke. Then I have another spoke over here that's going to be more about business development, right? So I want to make sure that I don't lose that spoke of keeping my edge. Marketing is about talking about what I'm doing now. My business development spoke is about making sure my business doesn't stagnate or I don't become irrelevant. So my business development might be where I bring in a board of trust or a board of directors. It might be where I do some professional networking. It's a spoke that I want to make even with the other key pieces that I have. Shall I keep on with my spokes analogy, or is this umbrella?
He said he gets it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, back off.
That's
Okay.
beautiful. Thank you very much for that. I actually am interested to get your take on this. This was one of our discussion questions that we have going on this week. So I'll be taking notes so we know that it's not copyrighted for those of you who haven't done the discussion yet, but I'm just interested to see what your opinions are. So talking about when PayPal created their viral, I mean, they viral marketed and didn't even have a marketing campaign. They obtained 1 million customers within 1 year without marketing budget at all. So with that, thinking about that and knowing your market, I mean, what is your opinion on PayPal and how they did that? I mean, not having a marketing strategy to be able to do that. Number one, I'd love to hear about it. Number two, you know, how can you do more effective marketing with less? Because that's really what they did. They didn't have any marketing budget. And then people just shared it with others. They were obviously one of the first people to come out that way. So what would be your opinions on how to do more with less, so to speak?
Okay. First, I feel like I'm in that dream where the teacher just gave you a case study that you didn't read. And she was like, so what's your opinion on PayPal's acquisition strategy of the...
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just interested to know.
Right.
I just think it's crazy.
I can talk about the doing more than less, but what I do know about PayPal that may or may not relate right now is that they actually didn't start out to get into the money transfer business. They were actually developed to be more of a personal, the PDA, remember pre-BlackBerry, the PDA? They were more into that platform. And they found that if they pivoted, they could take advantage of something that was just starting to become widely accepted as technology. So I think the key piece that we might not have talked about is the fact that they pivoted to something that was already growing. They didn't start the industry. Okay, so then how do I do more with less? Well, PayPal, first of all, found something that was already growing. Sometimes those opportunity-oriented needs mean you have to spark that industry, or you have to be the one that sparks that change. You're going to see a much longer tail for return on investment there. So first, you have to figure out where you are so that you can adjust your expectations to what less is. If you have to educate people about what you have and then also convince them that you want to be the person to provide it to them, you have a much bigger road than if you're joining an already established industry like HVAC. So how do you do more with less? Well, believe it or not. Okay, so do you remember that story? I wish I had prepped it. Do you remember that story about Abraham Lincoln where he knew about a man that had to go out and cut down 15 trees? Did somebody get me the 15 trees? Yes, maybe Deanna. All right, so he said like 15 trees. First day he went out, he only cut 10 trees. He came back and the man said, what's the problem? He said, I don't know, I can try harder. Next day he went out and he only cut 8 trees. He said, what's the problem? I don't know, I can try harder. Third day he goes out and he cuts even less trees. And finally the man says to him, did you take time to sharpen your axe? That was an absolute butchering of the story, but the point is sharpening the axe is developing your marketing strategy. So before you can do more with less, you have to know what you're doing. By developing the full strategy, figuring out who you're communicating to, what you want to say to them, and what the best way is to reach them, you're going to have an easier time flexing to your audience because you know where you're going instead of just trying to grasp in the dark.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Tiffany had a question on a strategy about using, I'll start over. Would it be best to use the SWOT analysis to ensure your goals and initiatives for your business will be more effective? I think she posted this right at the tail end of you speaking about business strategy.
Okay, so the SWOT is a place that you start. The SWOT is the place that you figure out what it is that your competitive advantage is, because that's what you find in your strengths. And hopefully you can pivot some of your weaknesses to a strength long-term. Opportunities and threats is where you figure out your place in the world or the market. So it's certainly part of your overarching strategy. The SWOT doesn't get you as far without also conducting a pest analysis. Do you guys talk about pest analysis somewhere in your?
We don't talk about it in this course, no.
Okay, so that's an easy Google too. Pest analysis helps you scan the external environment in 4 key areas and can inform your SWOT analysis in such a way that you're not suffering from confirmation bias. You know that like, well, I know this is my opportunity, so I'm going to go for it. If you list it as an opportunity, that doesn't make it so. You have to have data that backs it up. And so by performing a pest analysis in conjunction with your SWOT analysis, so many acronyms, I know, that can help you make sure your strategy has a solid foundation.
Thank you very much. And Nirka, I believe that's how I pronounce your name. She has a question on guerrilla marketing tactics. And if you could talk a little bit about those.
Okay. So when we talk about guerrilla marketing, what are we really talking about? Well, we're talking about marketing in the style of guerrilla warfare. We're talking about unexpected. We're talking about taking your customer by surprise. So guerrilla marketing are tactics that you use as part of an overall strategy. Guerrilla marketing is not what you would do only as your marketing strategy. It's just one way that you reach your customer and in an unexpected way. Now, sometimes when we think about guerrilla marketing, we think about big banners coming out of nowhere with like something popping through it and it really catches your attention and it's guerrilla marketing. But you can scale that to what your business needs to do to reach the customer. So let me give you an example. There was a high-end salon that opened in town, and before they opened, they invited all of the area waitresses from a certain level of dining establishment to come in and get whatever service they would like. So they could get their hair done or they could get their nails done just to see the spa. So when you think about that and you think about a waitress going to a spa, You think about two people that spend all their days talking to other people, and that's a really good crossover, a guerrilla marketing tactic for both businesses. So hairdressers in the new spa have something to talk about. Well, you know, we just partnered with this restaurant and they have this on the menu and blah, 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 blah. And waitresses have something to talk about. I just had a great day over at this spa once they have a relationship with the people they're serving. So guerrilla doesn't have to be high-end strategies. Sometimes it's finding a partnership that benefits both of you because you're reaching similar customers or reaching them in the same way.
Thank you. James has another question, kind of a two-parter. First, he said, "Cool breakdown." Oh, you can read the chat. Sorry. Sometimes I don't know if they're messaging me privately or if it's on the chat. James is talking about he's asking more about kind of email marketing. What would be some key principles or pointers for a successful e-marketing campaign, especially since he hates getting email ads? I mean, we all know that. And then he's wondering, you know, does e-marketing have a good return on investment?
All right, so e-marketing has a terrible open rate, and open rate is going to indicate whether you're going to get your return on investment. And return on investment can mean a whole bunch of things. So is it worth the time for you to craft and then send out these emails? Depends on your business. Is it worth your money to buy an email list from a different platform? Maybe. What I recommend with email marketing is that you start with customers that have already told you they want to be in business with you. Remember my earlier example of maybe giving away like a one-page PDF of tips and tricks related to your business only after you've captured that person's email? Well, then you're going to start to build a database, not that you've paid for or not that you've solicited without them knowing, but people that already want to find out more about your business. And then you're going to craft a subject line that you would want to open. This is the most common fail I see when businesses try email marketing. They try to cram something about their company in the title, or they try to cram all the cool things that they want to say into the title just in case people don't open it. Just a few words that make an interesting pitch in that subject line are all you need for people to open your email. That book that I talked about that I definitely need to be sponsored by, Dan Pink talks about how to craft a subject line pitch. And he talks about what works and what doesn't work when you're trying to move people that you might have a relationship with. So I would recommend practicing with some of he has like little activities in his book too that can help you get through that. But the key takeaway is to make sure that people have invited you to connect with them before you go spamming everybody about your business.
Thank you very much. And just for reference, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, Elizabeth, but James, you might want to check out moosejaw.com. I'll post it in the chat. I bought a couple, they're an outdoor, kind of like an REI. I bought some things from them and obviously on their email list, and their emails are phenomenal. I read every single word because even the fine print is different. It is so funny. And their catch lines, I mean, the subject, "My mean boss doesn't want you to see this list." "My mean boss really wants you to know about this sale." You know, and sometimes you can just see a little portion of it. So, I mean, they're very clever. Some people we've been trying to connect with. Even you go to their LinkedIn, and they've done it on their LinkedIn. The CEO or marketing person is endorsed for swimming, just because he got a bunch of people, you know, just silly things like that. It's very clever. I just figured I'd put that out there. And then just so y'all know, with IVMF's open rate for our newsletter, these are people who have already invested in us and taken a program. Most of all of them are free, and, you know, they're continuing in our alumni services. And our open rate for our newsletters is right around 30%, which is so much higher than an actual open rate.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, that's great. But when you're emailing it to 1,000 people and 300 open it, you know, from people who already invested us. So that might give you some help on whether it's worth it, James, just to let you know. All right. Sorry, just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Let's see, I'm going through the questions. I think we're good on questions. Anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask live? We are caught up with our questions right now. while you are thinking, I will ask one more. And Elizabeth, I'm just wondering, and I know we've talked about all different ways of marketing, and I just you're pushing this book by Dan Pink so much. I think maybe you might be able to talk a little bit about like product pricing and selling. Could you expand just a little bit? I know there's been some questions in the past. We don't really get into a whole lot of that, but I know that some of these businesses are product businesses, and it might help to discuss that a little bit.
Okay. So you're asking what factors you consider when you're pricing?
What are some good factors when they're thinking about how should I price my product?
Okay. So there's only two things that you need to know in order to find the best price for your product. That was almost an email subject line, actually. That should be my email there's only two things you need to know when you're pricing. Okay. So here's the two things. You need to know what your business is best at and what your customer is most concerned about. Now, sometimes those two things are the same. Most often they're not. What you're trying to do is price the value. Now, if my company is an artisan candle company, and I am best at finding only clean ingredients for my candle, my customer might care quite a bit about that, but it's probably not most important to them because you can get candles anywhere. You can get candles at most convenience stores now. So that's not really what's most concerning for them when they're looking for a candle. Instead, they might be more concerned with the story of a local business person opening a candle shop and meeting them either online, in the store, somewhere, face-to-face. They might be more concerned with the relationship. Now, it's important to note that your customer doesn't usually come right out and tell you what's most important to them. That's where marketing research comes in. You're going to figure out either in what they're saying or what they're doing, what's most important to them. But when you do, and you figure out what your customer is most concerned with, and you zero in on that one thing that your business does the very best, then you can understand where those value points are and start to compare them to other businesses for a benchmark and price in your time, your effort, and also all of the other things you need to do, like your supplies and your overhead and your variable costs. So it's more than just here's the cost. It's more than cost-based pricing. It's important to include value as well.
Thank you for talking about that just a little bit. I really appreciate that. We did have a couple of questions come in. I'm going to go to Alan's first. How can you measure customer experience, and how can you apply this information for success?
All right, so customer experience is best measured when it's not a yes or no question. So when you ask about your customer experience, make sure you're asking specifically what about their experience you're trying to measure. Now, this is the perfect question to follow up on that product pricing, because your first two questions should be about what you think you provide the best and what your customer is most concerned about. So back to my candle company, if I was most concerned about providing clean ingredients, my customer experience feedback, whether that's verbally or it's in an email or I'm capturing that in some other way, would be, did you know that all of my products are 100% clean and sourced from organic materials? Does that matter to you on a scale of 1 to 10? And then my second question would be, what is the most important aspect of my social media? What do you find most interesting about visiting my store? What is it that you find best about our customer service? And prompt them to give you a little bit more information. And then I think the follow-up was like, what do you do with that? Well, you start to aggregate it and you start to figure out what most of your returning customers find important. And you leave them space to tell you what you thought they thought was important is not true. You leave them space to help you course correct so that you're identifying the right areas of value. So ask some open-ended questions too.
Thank you. And then Alan made a comment here. So that is a qualitative measure. So then we are looking at the scope of human experience and the relationship with your product service. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Tracy Robinson, we haven't heard from her tonight as far as a question. She has a great question. And it has to do with, so she is a female sensei looking to increase enrollment of girls and women at the dojo where she teaches. What questions should she be asking both herself as well as her current female students to determine how to connect and convert prospects, students, and clients?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind is, what is the specific value that your students are trying to get from your class? Is it fitness? Is it safety? Is it competition? Is it, because those are just 3 reasons I can think about, and I'm sure there's 100 more of why people would engage your services. So that's where I would start. Can you give me an answer to that in the chat pane? Because I am curious.
She will. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she will. Go ahead. We'll give you a second. Go ahead, Tracy. So as you go in and put that in, do we want to go to one other question and then come back? You'd be okay with that, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'm flexible because I'm caffeinated.
Okay. All right. So while Tracy's kind of working on that, if Nirki had another question, when you're talking a little bit about her approach to people who can't afford. So her ideal customer apparently cannot pay for what she offers. How should she approach that? Should she create a special scholarship for them and attract the ones that can't afford it? What would be your opinion there?
So if they can't afford it, they're not your customer, they're your user, and you need to figure out who your customer is. So your customer is the person that's going to pay for that service. Now, sometimes it's local companies that will pay for the privilege of being associated with your brand. So they're going to make a donation, they're going to fund a scholarship, they're going to underwrite some part of your business, and they're your customer because they want to help facilitate the user accessing your brand. In some cases, that customer is related to your user. It's a family relation or a friend or a workplace relation, and they're willing to absorb the cost because of their relationship with that person. So the important piece to begin with is to figure out who is your customer, and then figure out what their motivation is to pay for the user to access your services.
Thank you. Nirka, if that answers your question, if not, continue, you can expand upon that. I think Tracy's still working on her question. We do have her answer to you. We still have a couple of minutes left. I know you've already shared to Sell as Human as a book, but usually I kind of at the end ask if there's any other reading materials, videos, things that they can watch. We like to take these resources, provide them links to. We give them a book. I'll put the link in the chat of the book that we give them. Now I'm coming up with a blank. Professional MBA. So that's the book they're kind of going through, Josh Kaufman. And we're kind of following the same chapters. We've got some good readers in this group.
Okay. So have you guys done Simon Sinek yet? Start with Why, that TED Talk?
We actually do a Mike Haney session that really talks about your why and opportunity recognition. Okay. So that's really what we do. We use our good old Dr. Haney for that one.
All right, excellent. I am sure he doesn't hold a candle to him, but he does actually write a book about it. So Simon Sinek does write, Simon Sinek doesn't hold a candle to Dr. Haney, just in case anybody is worried about where my loyalty lies. It's always with Dr. Haney. But yes, he does go into a little bit more detail, and it helps you figure out, again, where you're starting from in your business. So I recommend that one. And you know what? See, if I had realized what I had signed up for, I would have brought this book. There's a book called The Entrepreneurial Marketing something or other. And that will give you a good outline of what your marketing plan should have. Let me look online real quick for myself here. It's
Alan said it's probably under your cutting board.
Oh, I could get used to this class. This is a good group. Excellent. All right. It's called Marketing for Entrepreneurs. And it is likely in your library. The one that I'm looking at now is on Amazon by Frederick Crane. And it's like, you can rent it for $27, but you have to buy it for something crazy like $44. If you go to your library and look up entrepreneurial marketing textbooks, and you get 5 and kind of look to see how they organize marketing plans, use what works for you and create one. That's usually where I recommend you starting. There's not one book that's going to give you the best layout for a marketing plan, but if you get ideas from several books, usually you come up with something that works specific to your business. I need to go back to Tracy's answer
Yes.
because she gave me the details here.
Yes, she did.
Okay, so they sign up their underage daughters wanting discipline, attitude. Oh, that's not at all what I thought we were doing here. Okay, so we want to put kids on the straight and narrow. We want to we want to help women, self-defense, fitness, and then a large, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all righty. Okay, now I forget the original question. You wanted to know where you go to meet these people? Where you go to increase your enrollment?
Increase enrollment, and that's it.
All right, so we want to go to where we find your population in bigger numbers. So when you say underage daughters with discipline, attitude, well, you're absolutely going to want to get in touch with counselors at the local high schools, and you're going to want to say, this is a resource that you might want to provide to parents in addition to some of the other counseling resources that they need to have on hand. Their job is to be part of a network that supports parents, and you're helping support them. So that's a natural flow. You want to look for people that are supporting those kids and help reach them in that way. In some communities, that's the church. In some communities, that's private schools. It just depends on what the makeup of your specific area is. But then for the women that want the self-defense, you want to look for where you see women either living in a situation where they would need that. So think about apartment buildings and think about putting up flyers where you see people that have occasion to think about, maybe I need to defend myself if I'm walking to my car alone. So it depends. Again, it totally depends on the makeup of your community, but I'm thinking about some small grocery stores in Syracuse where there's flyers and there's a board, and you think to yourself, here I am getting groceries, and it's just occurred to me after seeing this flyer that I'm walking out into this dark parking lot by myself. So at that moment of tension is where, if you interrupt with a service maybe they didn't expect, you can capture attention in a new way. Oh, karate demonstration at her school. That's a great idea.
I know. And let me just promote our Ask the Class tab in Blackboard. These type of questions, like getting ideas of where to connect with people, sometimes sometimes you can't think about it in your business, but if you're thinking about someone else's business, you've got ideas, so you can post these type of questions in our Ask the Class or ask, and you can see it, and we can like chime in and make it a real cool group discussion. Just wanted to put that out there because there's some really great ideas here. Also, just so you're aware, Tracy, the thing that works for IVMF, our top way that people hear about our program is program referrals. So someone who's taken it and tells someone else about it, that's our number one recruiting tool, is the people, our student or our graduates. Oh yeah, great. Homeschool groups, all kinds of things coming through. All right, Elizabeth, so we have probably time for one more question. And so I will ask that unless we see something else come up that we can answer. And that's just, parades. Look at this. We got ideas coming like crazy. We'll make sure to save the chat and shoot it out to everyone, or I'll create it a PDF and post it in Blackboard so you guys can, don't worry if you miss some notes, you can look it up later. But Elizabeth, I just wanted to know if there was any final thoughts that you had to share with us, anything that we may have not touched on that you think we should mention. We have about 5 minutes left, so.
Final thoughts that we haven't touched on that we should mention. Yes. All right. So here's another thing that I sometimes get in conversations about when we're at VYs and we're doing office hours. And people tell me about who they're running their business ideas / marketing ideas by. And so I want to just leave you with this concept of weak ties versus strong ties. Have you talked about weak ties versus strong ties?
No, we have not.
Cool. All right. So strong ties are the people that usually hear about your business / random ideas / any idea that passes your head on a daily or weekly basis. Strong ties are usually the people you work with. They're the people that you see on a regular basis. So in my case, and especially in quarantine, it's my family and my colleagues, right? So these are the people that I usually bump into. And there's a certain amount of creative abrasion or a certain amount of ideation that happens with them naturally because they know me well. And so when I say, oh, I'm thinking about, they can almost finish the sentence. But when I'm interested in testing a new idea or when I have a new lecture that I want to make sure is perfect before I roll it out, I never go to my strong ties. You want to go to your weak ties. Your weak ties are the people that you used to go to high school with that you don't talk to anymore. Or they're the people that you worked a job with and you were really good friends, but then you floated off in different directions and you're no longer friends anymore. Your weak ties are the ones that are able to not only evaluate your idea, your strategy, your business from an outsider's point of view, but they have enough of a connection with you that they feel invested in giving you a legitimate response. So my weak ties are some of my colleagues that teach opposite semesters. And so I only see them in the spring semester and then they float away and I don't see them again until they return to campus the following spring. Perfect. By the time they come back, we want to have coffee and I always lead with my first best idea because they haven't seen me. They haven't seen it kind of come together and gel and they care enough to give me feedback, but they don't know so much about it that they're biased one way or the other. So one of the key points that I leave with you is to stop asking your strong ties for feedback. One, they're probably sick of talking about your business and they're sick of being nice to you about it. But two, you're not going to get to your next best idea until you bring a weak tie in. You guys have the perfect excuse now too, because everybody now knows how to use Zoom. So those people that used to be like, oh, I'm too busy or I don't have time, you have access to in a new way because the whole wide world is now able to use Zoom.
Thank you very much. James just asked a quick question. I think it can be answered quickly. What's the micro marketing Bible?
I don't know. What is the micro marketing Bible?
I think he's saying of like what would be a recommendation that you'd refer to for micro marketing as far as like, is there a book on it?
Oh, I was like, I don't know, I'm gonna look it up. I'm buying it tonight. I'm gonna get it and mark it up. And okay, what's the micro marketing Bible? The micro marketing Bible, I would say, yeah. So this started from our conversation on micro influencers, right? And so I think it's in that first word, that micro word. Sometimes when you get a strategy that works for you, you get really excited and you try to scale it up really big. Micro marketing is all about staying with the small pockets that work for you and maybe finding new small pockets too. That's okay. But I would say if I could sum up this fictional book in 2 words, it would be stay with the small influencers, stay with your core customer base. It's okay to add on, but don't get so hungry to scale up that you forget about that small base that's going to get you to where you need to be.
Oh, thank you so much. And I accidentally muted you and didn't unmute myself.
That's sad. All right.
I fixed it. So we are right on time. And I purely enjoy any time that I get to set a session with Elizabeth. Elizabeth is in a session for a residency program, and I'm usually not anywhere near the room because I'm running around 3 steps ahead of the event. So I've just been able to enjoy the time she's spoken to our online classes because I'm able to sit and listen as well. So I really appreciate it. I take notes too because we try to grow at IVMF, and although we're in the business of getting you to have a business and be successful. So So I learn things every time as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. And we are going to make sure to save the chat, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to finish. If you haven't watched the videos, make sure you get those watched, and then your homework due by midnight Sunday, right, Sandra? Yep. So look forward to seeing you next week. It will be on Thursday, not Wednesday, because Wednesday is Veterans Day. And I want to make sure that we're not holding our live session that day. So it'll be Thursday at 6. We'll make sure to send out all the information. Thank you again, everyone. I appreciate it. I'm always here. Reach out to me if you need anything.
And
Have a great night.
yeah, please reach out to me if you need help with
Yes.
the homework. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Anita.
Bye.